This is ESBR Boxing, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by Elliott Grigg as we preview what is a massive weekend of boxing on UK shores. Obviously, we've got Artur Beterbiev coming over and facing Anthony Yarde in the main event. A few great cracking fights on the undercard too, and that's really kind of where our attention is drawn to this weekend, isn't it, Elliott? Big weekend of boxing. I'm delighted to be back previewing it with you.
No, man, I'm delighted to be speaking to you, Paul. As you know, obviously, I suppose the more aware of our viewers will notice that we weren't it was Stotty and Danny that replaced us last week, and we hadn't undergone some sort of reconstructive surgery or digital enhancement to look like those two guys, as good looking as they both are. We are back in our regular slot, and yeah, thoroughly looking forward to talking through the event with you, Paul.
Yeah, I'm really excited, and it's good to be back. And we've got a good weekend of boxing, so I think why not? We'll get stuck straight into it. I believe you're going to take us through. We may as well start with the big fight. It's the one we all want to talk about. It's the one we all know most about. So do you want to take us through a bit about Beterbiev versus Yard, Elliot?
Absolutely, I will do. So yeah, so obviously, yeah. Beterbiev, better behaviour, some people call him, versus Yard. So this is obviously for the IBF, WBC, WBO world titles. I'm just going to give you a little breakdown, I suppose, of the physicalities of both guys, talk a little bit about their record, and then I want to ping it back to Paul, who is a braver man than I for a prediction. So we'll start off with Beterbiev. So Beterbiev is 37 years old, Russian, 5'11" and a half, reach 73 inches, got a record of 18-0. But I think the standout point of his record is there's 18 stoppages on that record. So 18 stoppages, 18 victories, no defeats. Got some big names on there. So Joe Smith Jr. absolutely annihilated him in 2 rounds. I don't want to say the guy's name. Alexander Gazovzik. 17-0 when he beat him, wiped him out 10 rounds. I mean, I say wiped him out, stopped him in 10. Callum Johnson, good name on that record. Callum Johnson's the one that kind of stands out. He was undefeated at the time, stopped him in the 4th round. But I think what stands out for people is he actually had Beterbiev over in the second, which is not something we've seen from him in that sort of fragility. It's not something you'd obviously associate with him. Obviously, he got back up and stopped him, but and that showed, I suppose, a moment of weakness there. But then a lot of other early stoppages on his record. So a man that obviously, I think it goes without saying, carries power. And we've got Anthony Yarde, who is 31, so significantly younger, actually, 6 years younger, 6 foot, slightly taller. I'm not sure it would make too much difference. I say it's only slight sort of height advantage, but obviously known again for his conditioning. He's got 23-2 record, but again 22 KOs out of those 23. So he's a man that also carries power, and impressively, in some of the gym footage I've watched, can also do the human flag. Something I've not been able to do for the last 2 years, but might limber up to it for 2023. But on his record, so yeah, obviously he's got victories over. Let's start with the losses. So he's got losses, obviously, to Kovalev. That was for the WBO world title. That was over in Russia. Again, equipped himself quite well, I think. I don't know if you agree with me, Paul. Comes out in a minute. Equipped himself quite well, actually, in that fight. I mean, there were some sort of tactical issues, I suppose, where people were suggesting that he shouldn't have emptied the tank and therefore got stopped by Kovalev. But he equipped himself quite well in that, even though despite getting stopped in the 11th round. Had a loss against Lyndon Arthur, which was a split decision loss. But frankly, I thought it was wider than a split decision. But then he also had personal issues. There were sort of bereavements outside of the ring that he was dealing with, and he came back after that and annihilated Arthur in 4 rounds. So I'm kind of a bit reluctant to really. I mean, it was a great performance from Lyndon Arthur that night, and he deserved the victory. But I'm kind of reluctant to really count that or classify that as a Yard defeat, given that he was sort of dealing with so many issues outside the ring at the time. So really, the Kovalev loss, and then obviously he's got victories over Dex Spellman, who UK fans will know. And yeah, a lot of KO victories against other guys beneath that. But this really is a substantial step up for Anthony Yarde. And I'm going to ask you, Paul, a couple of questions. Actually, I'm going to ask you firstly. We'll leave at the end with a prediction. But what I'm going to ask you is, how much better an opponent do you rate this version of Beterbiev than Kovalev for Yarde? And do you? We might as well get into the predictions. Do you give Anthony Yarde much of a chance in this fight, or do you think? I mean, it looks like with both their records, it's not going to go 12 rounds. Do you think it's going to have to be tactically for him a sort of get in and try and blast Beterbiev out like Callum Johnson tried, or do you think it's essentially no matter what he tries, he's going to get stopped?
First and foremost, that was a brilliant breakdown, Elliot. Do I give answer both your questions? I'll answer the second question first. Um, do I give Anthony Yarde a chance in this fight? I think yes, you do give him a chance. A chance. How big a chance that is remains to be seen. I think it all depends on what version of Artur Beterbiev turns up because he is 37. We haven't seen any signs of him on the decline, but sometimes that just happens overnight with fighters.
Mm.
And could this be Yarde's lucky night and his crying moment, and he just gets Beterbiev on a slight slide and somehow pulls off the unimaginable? I think really, make Beterbiev a massive favourite here, to be quite honest with you, and I do fully expect him to win. The fight will not go 12 rounds. I'm confident in that. Whichever man wins, it'll be inside the distance. I think Beterbiev could stop Yarde in the first half of the fight. Um, but it would also be interesting because Yarde is that much fresher
Mm.
than Beterbiev. If it does get into the mid to late rounds, can Yarde take over? But then again, on the flip side of that, you're thinking with Yarde's physique, he'll get tired quickly as well. So he might not want the fight to go past the halfway mark. He might see his opportunity of catching Beterbiev cold in the first few rounds, as you alluded to. So yeah, I do give Yarde a chance. Do I think he'll win? No, I could probably see Beterbiev stopping him in five or six, I'll say. Um, but put it this way, I'm giving Yarde more of a chance against Beterbiev than I would have done Callum Johnson prior to the fight. Obviously, Johnson did end up putting him on his deck on his arse, but could Yarde do that? Quite possibly, but then that doesn't mean that he's going to win the fight. Yeah, we've seen Beterbiev can get up and come back and turn the fight in his favor. So I would probably expect him to do that. I think for Anthony Yarde, he has to hope that Beterbiev is getting older, but I
Mm.
don't think there's any signs of that as of yet. As you said last time out, unification fight with Joe Smith Jr. and he absolutely obliterated him. So yeah, you know, um, I think we'll see, but I do have to really favour Beterbiev here.
And yeah, I mean, obviously, the people are talking about Beterbiev, Bivol as a sort of unification fight. As we said, Kovalev being in that division was kind of on the decline, I suppose. By the time he fought Anthony Yarde, I think that's fair to say, given the career he's had and the kind of rise and the kind of slight decline. I agree with you actually. I think if Yarde was to win and Beterbiev was to look kind of not average, but not his best, obviously people overnight would go, well, his age, he's 37, of course, that's going to happen. But yeah, I mean, how big a challenge, if we take let's scale it to say Kovalev was a 6 out of 10 challenge. How where are you putting Beterbiev on that continuum? Are you putting him like an 8, a 9? Are you dropping him down? Like where are you for Yarde? What sort of scoring would you give him in
Oh,
that scale?
it's got to be a 9 or a 10 out of 10 challenge, I think, because although Kovalev obviously did end up winning, I think there were signs then that he was starting to decline a little bit. And whereas we haven't seen that with Beterbiev. So I think it's on a scale of 1 to 10, yeah, it's got to be a 9 or a 10. Undefeated, carries dynamite in his hands. I think obviously Yarde has that equalizer too, but I think, yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is, a
But I think what's
nine and a
interesting is
half.
that Kovalev was, I think, 36, 37 as well when he fought Yarde. So I mean, I know there's been rumours that he's lived a fairly wild life outside of the ring. It's fair to say, and maybe not have done things that he could have done a bit better. But equally, he's a hero to many boxing fans. But yeah, thank you for that, Paul. I think I'm going to say I'm actually going to agree with you. I think Beterbiev will win, and I think it will be by stoppage. To be honest with you, when you said 5 to 6, I thought, that's very similar to what I'm thinking. So I'm literally thinking, in the sense that I don't necessarily think. Obviously, Yarde went 11, obviously, with Kovalev. Like you said, Kovalev was kind of declining. I just think he's going to get hit harder by Beterbiev, and I think he's going to have to essentially withstand a lot more earlier, so I can see it finishing similar. I think the only chance he has really, actually, to be fair, is fighting fire with fire, but I do expect it to finish, yeah, I'd say first half of the fight as well. So, Paul, we're not going to disagree on that one, but there are 2 opportunities for us to disagree further, and we've got 2 other fights we're looking at, and I'm going to pass back to you for our undercard, a look at our undercard.
Yeah, as you mentioned there's a few decent undercard scraps on this bill as well. And we'll start with let's start with British interest. Obviously you've got Willie Hutchinson and he's fighting Emil Markic. So a quick rundown of both fighters before we kind of get into it and I ask you a couple of questions. Obviously Willie Hutchinson, He's only 24 years old. He's 15-1 with 11 KOs. His only defeat was a stoppage defeat to Lennox Clark for the British and Commonwealth light heavyweight, sorry, super middleweight titles. This fight's up at light heavyweight now. Third fight at light heavyweight, I believe. He's 6'1", so he's 2 inches taller than his Markic, who is 39, so he's 15 years older than Willie Hutchinson, which is interesting. But he is 33-3. Of those 33 wins, 25 have come by way of knockout, so he's clearly carries a big punch as well. However, his three defeats have all been by stoppages as well. As I mentioned, a little bit smaller, both orthodox. But yeah, if you're kind of looking a bit more into it, I mentioned the Lennox Clark defeat there for Willie Hutchinson, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But Markic, a lot of people might know his name because of the recent fight he had with Callum Johnson. And Callum Johnson did end up winning inside 2 rounds, but I'm nearly sure that was a fight where in the first round, Markic like wobbled Callum Johnson as well. So and obviously as we talked off camera before as well, Markic has some good wins on there. He's clearly a powerful guy. He beat Thomas Adamek, kind of stands out a few years back. Um, so in my opinion, I'll ask you for your opinion in a second, but in my opinion, this is a very dangerous fight for Willie Hutchinson. I think fair play to him. He's kind of shown a fair bit of balls here, to be honest with you. I think it could be a cracker. It could potentially steal the show. Who knows? But yeah, I'm very intrigued by this fight. So I'll throw it back to you, Elliot, and just ask you: do you think Willie Hutchinson is a big favourite here, or can you see there being an upset? And yeah, just how you think the fight could potentially play out.
I mean, first of all, thank you very much for that, Paul. There's a very detailed and fine breakdown. Thank you very much for bringing that knowledge, A, to me, and B, to our viewers. But I think it's frustrating me actually because this is an opportunity for me to disagree with you, but I'm not actually going to disagree with you. I think looking at it I mean, obviously again you've got the age factor of Markic, like 39. Again, we could, like we were saying with Beterbiev a minute ago, like you could just go, oh, he's 39 now. This guy's Willie Hutchinson's 24. But in a weird way, I almost feel like because there's that age difference, I think it leads more into Markic. So if Willie Hutchinson was maybe say like 28, 29, 30, they've been around a bit more, and it was that sort of age gap, I'd actually probably make him a stronger favourite. But I think because there's that sort of difference in experience, I kind of lean towards Markic as well as potentially. I mean, unless it goes points, when I can obviously see Willie Hutchinson getting a home decision. And the one thing that kind of, like you said, there's obviously the losses that Markic has. Callum Johnson lost to an undefeated Salamov, but then the one that kind of also worries me a little bit, even though it was years ago, was a KO loss to Shefat Sufi, which I can't get my head round. Having seen Sufi versus Billy Joe Saunders, I think how could he have stopped someone up a light heavy in that way? But I think if you were going to bet necessarily, you wanted to look for some sort of outsider odds, this would be a good one to take on. Frankly, I do think Markic could beat him if he's motivated. Willie Hutchinson, sorry, I saw him in that fight against Lennox Clark. And I've seen him a couple of other times, and I'm not overly convinced that he's necessarily at a stage yet where this isn't a tough fight for him, frankly. Don't get me wrong, it's a decent step up, but I still think if he comes through it well, it's a great victory. So I lean slightly towards Markic if he's motivated. So yeah, unfortunately for those out there looking for a bit of controversy, I am agreeing with you, Paul, yet again, 2 out of 2.
Yeah, I mean, well, Hutchinson, I'm assuming, will be a favourite, just because of the name and it's in the UK and all that. But as you correctly alluded to there, he did show frailties in that Lennox Clark fight. Obviously, Lennox Clark's gone on and got beat by Mark Heffron, I believe, but Lennox Clark kind of ironed him out. He showed, does he have a glass chin? I know it's a bit of a harsh thing to say, but he could do, and up at light heavyweight now as well, moving up, 7 pounds, half a stone. So yeah, interesting, but we'll not dwell on that fight for any longer because we've got one more that we quickly need to discuss, and that is actually some world title action, if you call it that. It's not the WBA super title, but it's just the WBA title is on the line. In the flyweight division at 112 pounds between Artem Dekalian and David Jimenez. Now, those two fighters probably don't mean a whole lot to you, and they didn't mean a whole lot to either of us, I don't think, either. But having looked at this fight and looked up and down the card, it's potentially a cracking fight. Both undefeated. Dalakian, I'm going to call him. He's 21-0. And this would be his sixth defense of the WA title. So he's held the title for quite some time now. 21-0, as I said, orthodox fighter. 15 of those wins have come by knockout. 5'4.5", same height as Jimenez. He's born in Azerbaijan, now a Ukrainian resident. And if you look at his opponent, David Jimenez, he's 12-0. So nearly had half the amount of fights, but he's got 9 stoppages as well. So they both have roughly a 75% knockout ratio. Same height, as I mentioned, both orthodox. And this is an intriguing fight. You might not know a whole lot about them, and it might, you know, we don't know, as we can't say that we've sat here and studied hours on either man, but it's one I'm looking forward to. Dalla Kane beat Lewis Conception last time out, I think. But he hasn't fought in about 14 months, been active. But then on the flip side of that, I would say Jimenez, he's only done one 12-rounder, and that was his last fight, and it was a majority decision. He got in his favor. So my question for you here is, A, who do you make the favorite here? And B, well, I suppose you think, depending on the answer to the first question, is it because of the experience? If for example you think Dakalian is the slight favorite in your eyes, is it because he's the more seasoned fighter? He's been there, he's done that, whereas Jimenez has only had one 12-rounder and he's slightly inexperienced. What way do you see this fight going? Because I'm not too sure.
I was close, there, Paul, to cutting the connection for the internet just simply because I don't know. And I know he's asking me these questions and I'm going to have to try and answer something. Paul, you cracking up? No, I think I had a look at this morning, and it's one of those, to be honest, it's one of those where if you were doing like a picks league or a prediction league, this is a great one to put in because frankly, who knows? It's literally a pick and fight, isn't it? And it's like you're asking me to say whether, I mean, we've seen those, Jimenez is Costa Rican, and you're asking me to pick whether some sort of Latin Americans, South Americans coming over here. We've seen them, come over here and perform very well and almost coming to like tough, like, well, I was going to say, I'll say it anyway, tough bastards basically coming over here and putting on performances. But then, like you say, Dalakian as well has obviously been there. He's more experienced to have more fights. I think the thing that stood out for me with Jimenez was, like you say, had that victory over Sandoval, good victory, 12, obviously a majority decision. To be perfectly honest, I hadn't watched it, but he's got the victory. But then what I did realise was, and recognise, was that Sandoval stopped Jay Harris, didn't he? Yeah. A couple of years back as well. So there's a sort of reference point there. But like you say, the kind of the victories that Dalakian has tends to be kind of late stoppages. He's got quite a few late stoppages on his record. I actually don't think, judging by looking at both men and looking at their records, I'd be very surprised if he stops Jimenez. Again, just mostly, I'm basing that mostly really on the South American factor and the fact that he seems tough and he's a lot younger. Well, so he's younger, isn't he? Yeah, he's younger. But I think, yeah, I'd probably back Jimenez, frankly, just purely on the basis of that Jay Harris Sandoval connection and the fact that I've been wrong before in betting against guys that have come over from that region of the world to UK shores, even though he's not fighting a British fighter. And I just think, this is an opportunity, a great opportunity for him to win a world title. So on the basis of that, I would pick him. But again, I don't have any sort of strong reference points. And if you're going to go the other way, yes, it'd be nice for other people to obviously have that disagreement. But equally, I think both of us will be sitting there going, we're not prepared to die on either hill.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I am, just for the sake of it, gonna go with go with Dalakian and just the experience. I think maybe will tell. Again, I could see it being a points fight as well. I know both are big punchers, but I could see it going the distance. But yeah, definitely a fight I'm looking forward to. And on the whole, Elliot, I don't know about you, but I'm actually really looking forward to this card. Glad it's not on pay-per-view as well. So I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, headlined, as we mentioned earlier, and Elliot broke down wonderfully for us, Beterbiev against Yarde. Myself and Elliot Stott have done a big fight breakdown on that particular fight as well, a bit more in depth. But yeah, thanks once again, Elliot, for your time, and good to be back doing these weekly previews, and I'll speak to you again next week.
Brilliant, absolutely. Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much, guys, for watching.